Welcome, age of vintage society. Dorothy Dandridge was a fighter. Growing up in the Depression and making her way through Hollywood in the 40s, she encountered resistance. To her skin colour, to her refusal to play demeaning roles at every turn. Why was Dorothy Dandridge the Black Marilyn Monroe? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Dorothy Dandridge as the Black Marilyn Monroe. Dorothy Dandridge was assailed in the press for dating white men and blamed herself for her husband's philandering and her daughter's brain damage. Nearly every societal convention was against her, and yet she managed to make a handful of gorgeous, invigorating films. Films that offer a glimpse at the superstar she would have become if the studios knew what to do with a beautiful black woman. Her beauty was indeed phenomenal. She was called the Black Marilyn Monroe, and had flawless, radiant skin the black press referred to as honey and cafe au lait. But being a black actor in the 1950s meant playing savages, slaves and mammies, debasing roles that Dandridge refused on principle. In the films where she did get to play a non-servant, non-exotic, non-savage, she was not allowed to do more than kiss, as the idea of a black woman in love was altogether too dangerous for the screen. Dandridge was born in 1922 to Ruby Dandridge, a performer and aspiring actress. Ruby had left Dorothy's father 5 months before, taking her other daughter Vivian with her. Both girls showed some sort of aptitude for performance, or maybe that aptitude was drilled into them. And one of Ruby's friends, a woman named Geneva, moved in to help refine their singing and dancing skills. Years later, Dorothy and Vivian would figure out that Geneva was much more than her mother's friend, but at the moment she simply made them practice until they collapsed. The girls became an act, the Wonder Children, and earned a spot with the National Baptist Convention touring churches throughout the South. They added another girl, Etta Jones, to the act and became the Dandridge Sisters, touring all over California and eventually landing a gig at the Cotton Club. But to truly pull away from Ruby and Geneva, Dorothy had to do something even more drastic: get married. Dandridge and the dancing Harold Nicholas, were married in September 1942, and all seemed well. A daughter, Lynn, is born in 1943. But as Lynn grows, Dandridge realises that something isn't right. Lynn isn't speaking. She isn't responding. Doctors can't seem to agree on what was going on, and with Nicholas constantly on the road, Dandridge is in a shambles. Eventually Lynn is diagnosed with brain damage, probably due to a lack of oxygen during delivery, but Dandridge blames herself. She eventually starts seeing a therapist, and by 1949, fed up with lousy Harold, she asks for a divorce. Despite her antipathy for the new club scene, she recognises it as a stepping stone to a studio contract. Dandridge performs all over the States, but despises Vegas, which, at this point, is newly ascendant and filled with rat packers. Apart from race films, the studios only cast black actors in the roles they played in many white people's lives, aka servants, nannies, butlers, farm workers, train porters. Exotic roles that associate the black man or woman with the jungle. The US banned one of her films for showing an interracial kiss. The film Tamango became famous in the US for being a banned film. The Motion Picture Production Code of the era explicitly banned interracial romances from being shown. An Italian movie, Tamango, depicted a kiss between Dandridge and white actor Kurt Jurgens. The film was not shown in the US until 1962, after the dissolution of the Hays Code in American film making. But let's stop for a minute and think about it. Can you imagine what Dorothy could have been if she could overcome Hollywood's racial barriers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But even as Dandridge basked in the role of Hollywood's black glamour queen, hobnobbing with Gary Cooper, Otto Preminger, Kirk Douglas, Samuel Goldwyn and Marilyn Monroe, as well as black stars like Sammy Davis Jr., Harry Belafonte and Nat King Cole, her personal life was crumbling. Reports of affairs with Peter Lawford and Preminger, along with rumours connecting her with countless others, appeared in gossip magazines and flooded the black press. Suddenly she faced the kind of public scrutiny, isolation and invasion of privacy that contributed to the downfall of the most prominent symbol of the 1950s, Marilyn Monroe. However, for Dandridge the situation was compounded by the racial issue. Despite her acting ability and breathtaking looks, Dandridge was plagued by the movie industry's bias and confusion about the proper roles for fair-skinned black women, and by gossip about her interracial affairs. She never fulfilled the promise indicated by her Oscar nomination. 20th Century Fox nevertheless snatched Dandridge up for a 3-picture contract, and she went about lobbying for her true dream role, the lead in an all-black production of Carmen Jones. Fox slotted Otto Preminger to direct. Preminger was the kind of man who tolerated little in the way of bullshit. He thought that black actors were woefully underused and wanted to make the most of the tremendous talent he saw on the lot. She tried to fight down her typecasting, led to another typecast. In an attempt to avoid the violent criminal typecasting that plagued so many black actors in the era, Dandridge made a strong effort to cultivate a polite and clean-cut persona that would allow her to pursue more diverse roles. However, this backfired and ultimately led her to be typecast as a docile black figure. She had to fight against this conception to land her role in the award-winning Carmen Jones. The story of Dandridge's attempt to win the part of Carmen has morphed into the stuff of legend, which is another way of saying that half of it is probably bull. Dandridge wanted to prove herself as a serious actor, not a club performer. During their 4-year love affair, Preminger frequently gave Dandridge advice on how to advance her career. Perhaps the Austro-Hungarian director's opinion would have benefited a white woman, but it did little for the challenging career predicaments of a black actress in Jim Crow-era Hollywood. He encouraged her only to take leading roles, but those were in desperately short supply for black actresses, and ultimately that advice hurt Dandridge's career. Hollywood studios had immense control over the lives of their stars in the first half of the 20th century. Studios owned celebs and would lend them out to other studios like stud horses. Her studio forced her to have an abortion. The 1955 forced abortion of Otto Preminger's child ended the relationship between Preminger and Dandridge. After the abortion, Dandridge realised that Preminger had no plans to leave his current wife and children, and she wanted a more stable, long-term relationship. The stress of the abortion and the terrible career advice were the nails in the coffin of their doomed affair. Thus began a tumultuous, open secret of a relationship that would span the next several years. Her financial manager robbed her. As is all too common with stars, Dandridge was taken advantage of by shady financial managers. Not only did they not pay her taxes correctly, leading to a tax bill of over $139,000 in back taxes, they also stole over $150,000 from her directly. These misdeeds left her in serious financial hardship. A bitter divorce and the gross ineptitude and theft of her financial managers left Dandridge in dire financial ruin. She was forced to sell her Hollywood home and put her daughter into a public-run mental asylum. She went from being an Academy Award-nominated actress to having to rent a tiny, dingy apartment. Financial and personal problems, including a second marriage to an abusive husband, along with her frustration at being unable to overcome Hollywood's racial barriers, hastened the decline. In September 1965, a little over a decade after her breakthrough success in Carmen Jones, she was found dead in her apartment, the victim of an overdose of the antidepressant drug tofranil. Dandridge's cause of death has conflicting stories. A pathology institute has argued her death was caused by imipramine, an antidepressant overdose. However, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office had insisted she died of a fat embolism caused by an injury from her right foot. If you think a very late-term autopsy would unpack the mystery of Dandridge's death, I have bad news for you. Dandridge was cremated and her ashes are interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park's Freedom Mausoleum. Dorothy Dandridge was a Hollywood trailblazer, a black woman in the height of Hollywood success. Dandridge became the first black woman nominated for a Best Actress Academy Award. Hollywood really acknowledged her contribution to the canon of black history. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the groundbreaking actress Dorothy Dandridge's life and legacy?